Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 18th session of Sunday webinar series. So, today's topic is a deep dive into the business of self publishing, and it's being presented by ICF member Sanjana.
Hi everyone. Hope everyone is doing fine during this time, and thank you for taking the time to attend this session. So just before I start, I thought I'd give a small introduction as to how I'm going to be conducting the session. So I'm not a person who believes in presenting all of notes and reading off of the presentation. So what I've done is I've just added keywords. So I highly recommend that everyone listen carefully to what's being said and take down notes as and when you are coming across information that is useful to you. So that's personally how I end up presenting. If there are any questions that you have, always do stop me and ask me. After every topic, I'll give a 1 minute pause so that you can all recollect your questions and address them right then and there. So that way it can also be more of an interactive session. So at any point in time, if you feel like you cannot what I'm saying, do let me know. Okay, shall we start?
Yes, Sanjana.
And I can hear some background noise. I think someone needs to mute their mic. So if anyone has their mic turned on, please mute it. All right, thank you. Perfect. So let's start. I'm going to be starting with hello. Yeah. So I don't know how many of you here are aspiring authors. So there are many ways in which a lot of people who are aspiring authors enter into the business of publishing or seeing their material going out into the market. Writing is a difficult process, yes. Editing is a difficult process, yes. But getting published is a very complicated sort of a process, as I ended up discovering over my journey of publishing. I personally advocate for traditional publishing, mostly because it is, you get your money's worth. You don't pay the publisher, they believe in your work and they do go in for editing and then they do the proper services and the marketing. So you as the author, your entire role in traditional publishing is just where you are just the author. And yes, you do have a say, but a lot of times the traditional publishers, they have more control over your content and how they're going to market it, which is a huge relief for a lot of authors because a lot of times creative people aren't the best business people. But recently, self-publishing has changed that dynamic where it has forced a lot of creative minds to get into the mind of marketing and business. So that's why I wanted to talk about the business of self-publishing. So if you're an author who is struggling or someone who wants to put out a book and you're struggling to find a traditional publisher, self-publishing, even though it is a bit of a tainted sort of industry where people feel that if you're a self-published author, you're less of an author, even though there is that stigma, there are a lot of people who have approached self-publishing with the correct mindset and have been able to actually take their work and make bestsellers out of those works. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. Yes, I think someone has a question. Yes, please tell me.
Yeah, Sanjana, good morning. This is Divya Manchal. First of all, this is quite a new topic. Would it be a little slow? Would it be possible for you to walk us through the topic a little slow?
Sure.
Another thing is someone has asked to increase your volume also. So that would be helpful.
All right, all right.
And thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. Yes. I have increased my volume. Am I audible now? Yeah. I hope I'm audible now.
Yes, yes, Sanjana. You are clear now.
All
Loud
right.
and clear.
Okay, perfect. So what I'll do is I'll just go through the slides. So that way, these slides are merely a guiding point for the attendees because I know it's a very new topic. So do take down the keywords, and please do go ahead and stop me at any point and ask me any questions regarding any of these. Just one request, please, everybody mute your mics, because so that way I'm able to interact with people and hear everyone clearly. All right, so let's go to the next. So the first thing is I wanted to talk about what self-publishing is and the evolution of self-publishing. It's a very new topic, as ma'am said, and with self-publishing, it's been around for ages. So let's see how self-publishing actually came into the market. So with traditional publishing, the process of traditional publishing is that as an author, let's say I'm an author and I want to pitch my book to someone who will invest in actually publishing the book. As you all know, being editors, publishing is a costly process. You need to have people who actually believe in your work, who are willing to invest in your work, where they believe that it is marketable and that they can make a profit out of your work for them to even take it up in traditional publishing avenues. You have a lot of amazing traditional publishers out there and a lot of huge bestsellers and a lot of huge hits that are there in traditional publishing avenues. But at the same time, they do have a lot of books that probably don't make as much profits. They don't go for reprint and things like that. So in traditional publishing, it's always a gamble. That's why it's very, very difficult for an author to find a traditional publisher or someone who can actually believe in their work. So that's one of the challenges with traditional publishing. And currently with the market, a lot of people now having the knowledge of English and wanting to write in English and publish in English, it's become a very crowded field. Of course, in a lot of regional languages, it's a little easier if you're approaching a traditional publisher who's trying to publish in a regional language where the demand is a little less. But when it comes to English, so I'm going to be talking about the English writing market specifically. And here and there, wherever applicable, I may be talking about regional language markets as well. So coming to the English language market, it is a very international market, and you have a lot of people who are trying to break into the market and make it as best-selling authors. I think a lot of people, not everyone has the intent of writing something, spending years and months writing something, and have no one really appreciate it. So everyone does aspire to be a bestseller or have a book to their name where people can actually recognize their work in some way or form. So self-publishing kind of came around as a way to bridge the gap between the author and the market. So when the market traditionally rejected a lot of authors, there were a lot of people who were desperate enough to actually want their book out there where they were willing to actually pay money in order to get their book published. So that's where self-publishing kind of came in. It came in as a way to bridge that gap where people didn't have to worry, publishers didn't have to worry about market expenses or meeting a profit because they would get their money from the author directly. They wouldn't care about the sales aspect of it. So that's where self-publishing started its evolution business-wise. So that's where we need to understand the shortcomings of traditional publishing, being that they don't accept every single author that's out there in the market. And yes, there are some amazing books that have come out through self-publishing, which I will be getting into a little later as an example, so we can look at the market study and how they went about making bestsellers from self-published books and eventually transitioning into the traditional publishing market. So yeah, when it comes to self-publishing, it is labor intensive and costly. So later on, we'll also be talking about the different jobs and the processes that go into self-publishing as such. So in self-publishing, we'll be talking about costing as well. How much is too much to pay a self-publisher, and what are the practical options and costs that are available right now if you want to put out a book. And then we have different types of self-publishing that are available in the market as well. I don't know how many of you, can I just know if there are any people who work as editors in a self-publishing company here? You can just raise your hands if there are any. You can also pitch in your ideas and your opinions later on, because we do have a slide regarding editing and self-publishing industry. Believe it or not, there are a lot of variations between editing in the self-publishing industry and the traditional publishing industry. So we're going to be talking about that as well. So yes, there are variations in self-publishing. We also have something called vanity publishing, which is often confused with self-publishing. So vanity publishers came around because what happens is self-publishing often gets really costly because they require editing services, they require proofreading services, they require a lot of services when it comes to graphics or adding illustrations and things like that. Sometimes self-publishers take those up. When it comes to vanity publishing, they're merely a printing press. They're not publishers. But you have a lot of people who confuse vanity publishing and self-publishing, and they end up going for these predatory publishers. So vanity publishing, as the name suggests, is just where you publish your book for the vanity of having published a book. Your name will be out there and you'll have a book to your name. But they don't take up marketing, they don't take up distribution, they don't take up even editing for that sake. Sometimes if you Google, just a fun activity for everyone watching, if you can Google some of the worst edited books out there in the market, the ones that have the highest number of errors, they're often books from vanity publishers. The reason being is because right after the author writes their manuscript, it immediately just goes for printing. There's no processes that take place in between. So that is exactly what vanity publishing is. So you just publish merely for the vanity of having published your book. Another thing is desktop publishing, and this is something I'd like to elaborate on a little later on as well. It's a very new concept in the market. It's something that a lot of people are exploring. And I think a prime example here that I'm going to be using is the Amazon platform KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing. I think a lot of people would have heard about Kindle Direct Publishing. So this is where you as the author have full control over how you publish your book, and you just merely upload your book onto the site and it's available in the market directly. The shortcoming over here is that, yes, you need to probably hire an editor outside of the market. So any editors over here looking for work, you can always pitch that as one of your services where you do edit, KDP books and things like that. So that's actually a really good up and coming niche that's there. I know a lot of editors who do that as a prime business, in fact. So desktop publishing has given rise to a lot of these filler categories where the author seeks out those services. They seek out someone for pagination. They seek out someone for editing. They have full control over who is going to touch their book. And that is something I think a lot of authors find liberating. The shortcomings in that being, it's a very crowded market now. Anyone can do it. You merely have to spend probably around 10,000 to 15,000 bucks if you're just thinking about layout and pagination. And if you feel like you can do the editing yourself, that's about all you'll be spending if you want to go for it. And let's say you can even self-learn how to index and paginate your own work and before uploading on KDP through YouTube videos. It is a very intensive sort of a process. It comes with a lot of trial and error, but it is practical and very possible to do desktop publishing at zero cost. So as the author, you can definitely write your book and immediately go for desktop publishing and your book will be available in the market. But yes, there are some things that go on in between, and I will be addressing that later on. Yes, is someone asking a question? So I'm done with this slide. So if anyone has questions, you can definitely ask them here before we move on to the next topic.
Sanjana, when you
Any
talk of
questions?
yes, Sanjana, when you talk of desktop publishing, do you mean the print on demand model that is there?
Yes, there is a print on demand model and there's an online model. So KDP goes directly for Kindle. In India, that's the most recognized one is the Kindle versions, which are directly going up. Recently, they have launched print versions where it goes directly to print. So you can place a request for demand with, and a lot of other issues and hiccups that come with the print on demand scheme that is there on Amazon KDP. So currently there are two variations again. One is the purely online model and the other one that goes for print on demand that is there on KDP. So that is exactly actually what I'm alluding to, except I'll be focusing more on the one that is widely used, which is the Kindle version, publishing the Kindle version. Yes, any other questions? Okay, shall I move on to the next slide?
Yes.
Okay, so here I'm going to be talking about the process. And so the headings that I've used here on the screen are the headings that when you approach a self-publisher, these are the headings and this is the process that they will be telling you. So the first thing is bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is a very business term where, they kind of make you believe that whatever money you're giving, they will economically use that money for different types of services. For instance, if you're going to pay 50,000 to a publisher, a self-publisher, so each self-publisher has different packages. Let's say you're paying 50,000. They will tell you, okay, for that 50,000, we're going to be hiring an editor for you. We're going to be hiring, we'll be doing the proofreading process. We'll be doing the layout. We'll be talking about graphics. We'll be talking about the illustrations that are taking place in your book. We'll be coordinating with you as to how you want to put out your book. So in most of the times, what happens is the author just comes up with the content. There won't be much of a vision with the layout or how they envision the, illustrations to be, or how they want each chapter to be laid out. So in that case, they'll say, we'll allocate someone for you. So the costing is mostly for the processes and the manpower and time they invest in the publishing process.
What?
So bootstrapping is basically
What? Huh? Well, I wanted to ask you a question.
Hello? Yeah. Okay, so bootstrapping is basically delineating which processes are going to be given for whatever cost you're paying. So that's how a lot of authors end up choosing their packages. So let's say an author already has their layout completely envisioned, or they have their graphics, everything in line, they have their book cover in line, they already have their vision. Then in that case, an author can go back and negotiate the deal and probably ask for a reduced cost. But a lot of times, what happens is the average author, when they enter in and they approach a self-publisher, what happens is they end up being, blindsided, because a lot of times they don't know what processes are involved and what it actually takes to do different services. Sometimes they'll say, a generation of your ISBN costs this much, or your copyrights are going to cost this much. And a lot of times, you can obtain some of these things for free, but they'll end up putting a charge because they'll say, no, we're doing it on your behalf. So understanding what costs go into what services is also a very, very useful process if you are an author who's going to approach the self-publishing industry. And I think the next person who's going to talk after me, I believe is also going to be talking about the legal aspects of it. So I'm not going to go too deep into that. Hopefully, when I join and we'll see what he has to offer in that aspect as well. So I'm not going to try and overlap on that content as much as I can. So yes, bootstrapping, that's about it. The next thing is what happens when we actually build the book. The process of actually building the book is what a publisher would call as right from A to Z, right from taking your content to distributing it not only through print platforms, but in online platforms as well. Because building a book online that is for Kindle or building a book for print requires two different processes. The reason being is it differs in pagination, it differs in how the layout is going to be, it differs in how you plan. Because the Kindle, I don't know how many of you have seen, or I'm pretty sure a lot of you have seen the Kindle version of many books. It is very different from your physical copy of a book. So there's a lot of differences and nuanced differences that come in when it comes to uploading something on Kindle and actually physically printing a book. So based on what the author requires, and a lot of self-publishers right now, what they do is they don't really give you the option of just print. A lot of the big self-publishing companies, they say since a lot of sales is online, they require you to go through online building process, quote unquote. So you will be asked and you will be guided through both of the processes. Each self-publishing company has different standards for building their book. There are some companies who don't invest a lot. They try to maximize, the margin for earning is going to be a lot more. So a lot of the poor authors who just really, really are desperate to get their word out there end up being caught by these companies where they don't really have a very intensive building process. The reason why traditional publishing has a really good name is because their approach to building a book is very personalized. And it is very, very intensive. They care about every single word that goes out there. Of course, there may be a few errors here and there. You've seen a lot of novels that have a few typos here and there and grammatical errors. Yes, there may be some overlooking here and there when it comes to huge novels. But when it comes to self-publishing, you are more likely to find those errors versus in a traditionally published book. So that's kind of the difference when it comes to building the book. It's very unique to each self-publisher. It's very unique to each company, but the overall process in publishing usually is followed, except in few cases where they don't really hire editors. What they do is instead they say, okay, we'll just do the proofreading part. And they just kind of negate a lot of the, actually what really goes into copy editing, they don't really do. So that's where you probably need to be careful, because, you know, when somebody's telling you that we'll be doing editing services, you need to ask them to define what they mean by editing, because each publishing company defines editing in a different way. So that's something that I would definitely advise to everyone who is probably thinking about going into self-publishing. So, and especially being in the industry, you can ask very smart questions yourself about what the process is going to take. So yes, that's the second point. And the third point is reach and market analysis. So what happens is in self-publishing, often the reason they charge a little more than just merely printing your book, the cost of printing your book, is because they understand the market. And they also claim to understand the audience that they can reach. So they usually have tie-ups with a lot of big book companies, or companies that actually go in for sales, like Higginbotham's or something, where they end up distributing the book that they've published to these companies. The only thing is they charge you for that distribution. They charge you for the marketing process. And that's something that they do. Sometimes they'll even ask you to appear for certain literary festivals that happen around the country, because they know that that does give you a bit of visibility, it does give you a bit of reach. The thing is, it won't be as individualized as one would expect. The reach and market analysis is not as personalized as one would expect. Usually it's just a 1 or 2 day meeting. After that, they kind of, you know, because they have other clients and they're always trying to look for business. At the end of the day, self-publishing is a business, and they will be trying to capitalize on a lot of these authors and trying to ensure that they can maximize on their profit. So I would suggest anyone who's going to approach self-publishing to do their own reach and market analysis, and how you would do that is first by defining who your target audience is. So if your target, let's say you're probably doing a self-help book, define who that self-help book is going to be targeted towards. Is it going to be for students? Is it going to be for mothers? Is it going to be for fathers? You know, things like that. Just define who your target audience is going to be, because that will help you in understanding who your reach is going to be. And then do a simple Google about the current books that are out there in the market, and which books are bestsellers, which books aren't doing so well. And always look more at the books that aren't doing so well, so that way you don't repeat the same mistakes. That's usually an easier way to start. When you look at the bestsellers, it's hard to analyze what factors are making them a bestseller, because it's kind of like the stock market. It really does depend on a lot of factors. It depends on the political situation sometimes. It depends on the region that you're in. It depends on the overall mood. Like, for instance, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And that being said, it does influence what people choose to buy online. Maybe people are more depressed and they're trying to look for more upbeat content when it comes to reading. Things like that. There are so many factors that go into that. So rather than looking at the bestsellers and trying to figure out what they did right, try to look at the ones that have got it wrong, because it's an easier way for you to start and negate at least what they did wrong. And you can go and work from there. So that's what that's the end of the third point with reach and market analysis. I'll be talking a little bit more about the market later on. So yeah, apart from that, they call a process, one of the processes is called expand. Expand basically means where they, once the book is out there in the market, how are they going to distribute that and make sure that it reaches different people? How are they going to ensure that the book reaches different aspects of the market and actually reach the target audience in different areas? So that's basically what expand is, where the publisher is going to sit down and look at the various factors that they can do in order to expand your book into the market to the best of their ability. And broadcasting is intertwined with expand in a lot of ways, because when it comes to broadcasting, especially in the modern era, it's not what it once was. Before, with broadcasting, you know, we used to have a lot of the, I don't know, I think a lot, they still do have that section of the newspaper, the literary review. And those used to be like some of the primary broadcasting techniques back in the day. But recently, with broadcasting and social media, it's taken off into a different direction. It's both a blessing and a curse, and we will be looking at social media and its influences on self-publishing and the marketing of self-published books later on in this seminar as well. So that's about it with the process. This is the basic process. If there is something that anyone did not understand or would like for me to give more depth on, please do ask me at this point before I move on to the next slide. I'll just give like a 30-second gap so you can collect your thoughts.
Yeah, Sanjana, this is Deepak here.
Okay, yes, tell me.
Yeah. So with regards to building the book, right? So do you suggest any particular process, or is it entirely taken care by the editors of, suppose, say, because some say you need to have a like an emotional flow, like an ups and downs, so that you can keep the readers interesting. Others will be like have a connected graph of all the facts and figures, whatever you're going to put in the book, etc. So is there a set way or few recommendations from your side?
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to building the book, a lot of publishers. So what happens? I think your question is more specific to the author approaching the publishers, because usually it comes. Yes. So in that case, what will happen is you finish usually building some part of the content, and that's usually what self-publishers expect. So when it comes to the emotional flow of things, whether there is a proper flow, the voice is correct, all of that, that comes under copy editing. If they're, once you have your content given to the publisher, they will ensure that your flow is there, but you are the primary decider as to how you want your flow to be. You as the writer are going to be in control of what you want and how you want to convey your message. But whether your thoughts of conveying the message is going to reach the reader is where the copy editor is going to come in and determine that. And what happens is in self-publishing, that process, usually the self-publishers don't really have that process as intensive as it's supposed to be. Because when it comes to reworking a novel, let's say a 65,000 word novel, ideally it should take around a month or even more than that. When you go to a traditional publisher, approaching them, having their agreement signed, and once they take on your book, it takes months to years for them to actually see the end product. In self-publishing, they can't afford to take that much time, because you're paying them for services for a specific amount of time. So some of the processes, like you're talking about the flow and all of that, are going to be a little overlooked. It's not going to be as perfect as possible unless you as the author already have some sort of control or knowledge about how to write a book with a really good flow. So that's one of the negatives of self-publishing, is what I would say. But it's a really good blessing for authors who already have the raw materials that are available to put out a really good book that flows really well. So my advice would be have someone, so there are a lot of intermediaries that are out there. So hire your own copy editor, hire someone who can do that service for you. The only problem is in the market, there isn't much awareness as to how necessary these sort of editing techniques are required for a book, especially when it comes to self-publishing. So my personal advice would be to hire someone with that knowledge, or personally sit down and learn it yourself. So that way you don't have any regrets once your name is out there and your book is out there in the market. So that would be my only advice for people who are going out there. Hope that answers your question, Deepak.
Yes, got it. Thanks a
Okay,
lot.
perfect. Yeah, sure. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, Sanjana, you just mentioned that sometimes the authors whose books or manuscripts have been rejected by the publishers, and then they go for self-publishing.
Yes.
So does that mean they don't go through peer review kind of system, which is taken care at the end of publishers?
In self-publishing, there is no peer review system.
Okay, so even if the content is not good enough for the market, the publishers would be publishing it.
They will be taking it. It will only dependent upon your bank balance. So if you have enough money to pay them for their services, they will do it. So what happens is, if they feel that the book is really not that good, Some publishers, very few publishers, do have a session where they interview the author and they say, yes, we can self-publish this book for you, but we suggest these changes. Very, very few people in the market do that. But at the same time, like I said, because of time constraints, they won't be able to do it as intensively as one would want it. So that would be one of the negatives in self-publishing. If you're looking for someone to actually peer review and give you an honest opinion and sit down and rework with you, traditional publishing is the only way to go about it in a more effective way. Hope that answers your question, ma'am.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, I think we'll move on to the next slide. So yes, I think you would have already got a somewhat idea as to what self-publishing is and how people go about self-publishing. So that being said, while there are a lot of positives to self-publishing for a lot of authors, there's also a very dark side to self-publishing as well. And that's what I wanted to talk about. Because if you're going to approach someone to publish your book, I would definitely expect you to have some sort of knowledge about the dark side of self-publishing. So the first thing is costing. So how much is too much? How much should you pay someone to publish your book? I would suggest, it does depend again on the market. So what I'm going to do is, without specifying names, I'm going to talk about two companies that are actually out there in the market. And we're going to do a bit of a case analysis in that aspect. So one of them is an India-based company. We're going to call it Company A. This company has 4 different packages for self-publishing. The starting package comes to around 30 to 35,000 rupees. Then their second package is around 55,000 rupees. Their third package comes to 1 lakh. And their the fourth package is around 3 lakhs. So as you can see, there's a huge discrepancy between the first package and the fourth package. So why is there a discrepancy, and is it worth it? Now let's talk about that. So when it comes to the first package, this is where most probably you're not going to get your printing services. This particular publisher is not going to offer you the printing services that you would require. What's going to happen is this publisher is going to take your book and upload it on KDP, which is again a free platform. So why do they charge you that money in the first place? The reason is because in the first case, what they will say is that we need this money to edit it. We need this money to do the proofreading. We need to compile it. So that's why they charge you that money in the first place. After that, they will say once you're satisfied with the sales, and then they will tell you that they will sell it. Then they will make it a bestseller on Amazon. And talking about best-selling and how to generate a best-selling on Amazon is another 1-hour topic, which I cannot get into right now. But there are ways to artificially generate it. So what a lot of self-publishing companies do is they require you to have a buyback amount of certain, where you have to purchase your own book for a specific cost, so that your listing goes a little higher, and that you're more visible on the site. So there are different tactics. This is just like one of them, but there are different tactics that they use for marketing, and they give you this consultation, and the consultation itself has a fee of like 5,000 bucks sometimes. So this is kind of how the industry works. So self-publishing is not a very cheap process, especially for someone who already knows some of these. If you know editing, if you know copy editing, I would suggest, just directly upload onto KDP would be my personal advice. Maybe learn a few nuances or hire someone for the layout, but that's about it. But yes, self-publishers do have a market value, which is going to be much higher than, someone actually doing that process, because they are, again, a business and they need to sustain in the market. So they are going to charge you more than what the actual cost is going to be. I wouldn't say that's a bad thing, because at the end of the day, it is a business, and I can't really tell someone how to run their business or how much profits they should make out of it. But at the same time, I think there's some ethics that goes into making a profit. Me being in the business, maybe not of self-publishing, but with publishing services and different things, I can tell you for a fact that at least a lot of these companies have a margin of about 25 to 30%. Which is a huge margin, but at the same time, I would say that, again, it depends on which package each person is choosing. Now, when it comes to certain packages, like for instance, package number 3, which comes to around 1 lakh, that the margin is definitely going to be a little higher, because printing charges are going to be involved. They're going to tell you, they'll probably give you a copy number of like, let's say, for example, like 200 copies will be printed the first time. Sometimes, yes, it goes in thousands and, depending on how much you pay, it does differ. But in this case, again, they require you to have a buyback of 30 to 40 books so that the market numbers reflect a little differently. So this is something that, is one of the trade secrets. I wouldn't say it's a secret because it's common knowledge in the industry. There are a lot of YouTube videos on it. So if you can, if you're free, and you're interested in this, you can definitely Google about, buyback policies and how that works and affects your numbers in published books and self-publishing especially. So that's one thing. So how much is too much? There is another company, Company B, which I didn't talk about. So this is Company A, and these are their packages. It is debatable as to whether it's worth it or not, but at the end of the day, they have a name, they have a reputation. And if you think that their reputation is worth the amount of money that they're charging, then you can definitely go with them. Now, Company B is there. And Company B is an associated name with a traditional publisher, a very, very popular traditional publisher, which again, for legal reasons, I don't want to mention their name. But they're a very, very popular publisher in India. So I'm pretty sure whatever person you're thinking about right now is probably that publisher. So that publisher, what happened is they started a self-publishing unit because the business of self-publishing was booming. So when they started that self-publishing unit, their costing was ridiculously high because they were a very reputed publisher. For instance, their starting package was 10 lakhs. Which is extremely different from Company A's policy. Now let's see why Company B probably charged that much. Number one, you would probably wonder, is the brand of that company so worth it that they would require you to charge 10 lakhs just for a starting package? There were a lot of factors when we actually looked into it, and eventually it proved that Company B's policies was not sustainable in the Indian market because, of course, people here, they will spend for some amount when it comes to publishing their book, but I don't think anyone is willing to spend, that much just for the sake of publishing, that to just a one-time print. So that, I think, was not sustainable. When we actually looked into it, we realized that they outsource a lot of their work to foreign companies. So the costing comes in dollars. So when you convert dollars into rupees, of course, it's going to be significantly, if not exponentially higher. So that's where they kind of had a failed business model when it came to their market in India. But there were a lot of people who did get scammed, unfortunately. And the reason I say it's a scam is because even though their market wasn't doing well, they didn't really confess that to the people who had paid them. And a lot of people couldn't get their money back because they couldn't see the services actually come to light. So that's another risk, especially when it comes to the new self-publishers in India. Or anyone who's starting out. A lot of times they take money believing that they'll be able to provide a service, but at the end of the day, it's something that they cannot deliver entirely. So when it comes to new publishers, don't approach them immediately just because they either have a name, or sometimes even new publishers, they are very, very cheap in their costing. Don't approach them just because of those aspects. Make sure that they have a name, and that even if you're paying just $50, that you're able to get your money's worth in terms of services. So do your market research in terms of the publisher. So before you actually trust someone and give them your money. So yes, so when it comes to costing, definitely I would say 10 lakhs is too much. But when it came to the costing of Company A, even though I did disagree with some of their packages and I felt that a lot of things were probably, it could have been downsized to at least 15%. I can't argue because they do have a name in the market and they did find people who are willing to pay that much money for them. And at the end of the day, that's what business is about. It's about how much your demand is in the market and how much people are willing to pay for your services. So yes, of course, that is one of the sides that I think a lot of people don't understand. And they end up believing that it is, what they pay is exactly what you get. So in Company A, recently what started happening is, even though their pricing was moderately reasonable, a lot of people were not able to get the satisfaction from having published their book with them. The reason being, they eventually realize that the process did not work out. Because when they do sit down and do a consultation with you, they tell you about the market. You believe that the other person knows what they're doing with your book. But the reality is they're as much as in the dark as you are. It's literally like the stock market, like I said. So when you're going to pitch your book into the market, you don't know how it's going to perform because it is based on so many different factors. Whereas in self-publishing, because they need you as a client, they're willing to sell you the sun and the stars initially so that they can get your money. And then after that, yes, they'll do the bare minimum services, but practically everything that they promised would not be able to come to light. So that's one of the issues that I wanted to highlight. So the next point I wanted to talk about is do your own book. So yeah, when it comes to doing your own book, can you do your own book? Can you completely publish your own book? Can you do it on your own? The answer is yes. And I'll be going on to doing that, talking more about that a little later when I'm talking about the desktop publishing services as well. But at the same time, in self-publishing, they don't really tell you the costing of what it is to do your own book. The truth is, like I said, it is possible to do it for completely free of charge. It is very, very possible. So we will be getting into the nuances of that a little later. Why I included this in the dark side of publishing is because this is an untold secret where the industry does capitalize on people who do not have much awareness as to what goes on within the industry. So that's why I added that point. And the next thing is, what questions do you ask? So let's say you're going to a self-publisher and you want to, have someone, you want to really get your money's worth. So what do you ask? What questions do you ask? The first thing is I would want you to ask about is your copyrights and your ISBN. Ask them who is going to have ownership of what is called an ISBN number. That indicates a lot of things because usually what happens is the ISBN ends up being in the name of the publisher themselves, and that gives them complete rights to your book. So that is something I would encourage everyone to ask about. I can't go into detail at the moment because that would take a lot of time, and I'm hoping that gets covered in the next session when you're talking about legalities and acquisitions and stuff. So, but this is something I would encourage all of you to Google and understand a little more about what an ISBN is and what a copyright is and the difference between the two. And so ISBN mainly is one of the issues that a lot of people don't understand. They believe that if copyright is under the publisher's name, it's fine. But ISBN also indicates a lot about whose ownership and who takes ownership of what metadata and what content that is out there. So that being said, this is one of the questions. The first thing that you would have to ask is understand what the copywriting process is and understand what it actually means. So if the publisher is saying that it has the rights are reserved by that publishing house, what does that actually mean? Legally, if someone is going to do something, will the publisher fight for you? Or does that mean they just have rights to that book and how they use the book? Understand what scope of what they can do with your content. Would they be able to do reprints as and when they desire? Will they be able to do it posthumously? These are things that you would need to understand and first ask about. So get the legal aspects cleared, especially when you're talking to any self-publisher. Another thing that you should ask about is when you're paying a certain amount of money, let's say you're choosing package 1 or 2, it doesn't matter what package you're choosing, ask them about the details, because yes, they'll give you the broad headings as to, okay, this is editing, this is the proofreading process, then we'll go for printing, and then we'll do a revision or two. Ask them what they mean by editing. Ask them what they mean by proofreading. So when they say editing, ask them if they're just going to do a standard spell check and put it up on Grammarly and highlight all of that stuff, or are they actually going to check for flow? Are they going to check for the voice? Are they going to check for readers? The ease and how the reader is going to be perceiving your content and things like that. So ask these questions. Another thing you should be asking is your layout. Ask them who's going to be deciding my layout, who's going to be deciding what illustrations are going to go where. Do they have control over it? Because sometimes what happens is publishers, they do take control over certain aspects of layout, especially when it comes to the book cover, because they have certain ideas as to what they believe is more marketable. So as an author, you probably have different goals with your book. Maybe you want to represent your brand with a specific image, and that's why you've chosen a specific cover. So communicate that to your publisher. Communicate your goals of your book to your publisher. So these are things that you need to make sure are taken care of when you're sitting down for negotiation, or even right at the beginning stages when you're approaching any publisher. So these are the main questions that you should be asking. The next thing is, of course, vanity press versus self-publishing. So can you go for any vanity publishers or vanity presses that are out there? The truth is, yes, there are some people who are very good with marketing, who just to save up on costs, they approach a lot of vanity press to publish their book. And a good example of this, I can't mention names because I don't want to get into trouble, but businessmen who have huge networks where, they know for a fact that their book is going to sell, or they know for a fact that there are people to buy their book. Those people can easily approach vanity publishers or vanity presses out there. And you don't have to go for the big names. Again, with vanity publishing, you need to be a little careful. If you believe you can do the editing, you can do the layout, and you just need someone to publish your book, then approach a vanity publisher. You don't even need to go for like the big names that are out there in the industry. I don't know how many of you are from Chennai, but I do know that in Perry's Corner, you have a lot of these publishers and presses. So in fact, that's a very small place where you can find really, really good printing presses that are out there, and they do amazing quality work. You can ask them and you can place orders. So sometimes the small time presses do really, really good work compared to the so-called vanity publishers who are dedicated to merely printing books here and there. So that is one thing that I wanted to tell. So it doesn't mean that either of these words are bad words in the industry. I have seen different people work with vanity publishers or self-publishers and become great successes later on. It solely depends upon the factors that you're working with. But if you're a new author and you're launching yourself into the market, I would suggest always trying to go for traditional publishing first. Get a few rejections. I know it takes a few months, but get a few rejections and then consider self-publishing, because you never know, maybe your book is good enough for the market. You probably don't even have to spend as much money. And you never know, your book might take off. So don't immediately assume just because you have one rejection that everyone else is going to reject you. It's a process. Maybe take a few months with that. Try to, if not get a traditional publisher, approach what is called as a literary agent, who will find, so what happens is when literary agents take up your books, these agents have tie-ups with different traditionally published companies. So they take a commission, so your royalties will be a little less. But at the same time, if your sole goal is not to make a huge profit out of your book, but you just want someone to believe in your work, put your art out there, and whatever royalties you get is fine. In that case, I would highly recommend, after trying for traditional publishing, go for trying to find a literary agent. You have some amazing literary agents here in India as well. So you can definitely, I don't want to say that right now. I don't want to mention names right now, but definitely later on, if you want some recommendations for literary agents or traditional publishers, or even some really safe self-publishers, you can always reach out to me later on, and we can have a discussion about that. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about when it came to the dark side of self-publishing. Do you have any questions, or can we move on to the next slide? I'll just give like a 30-second gap.
Sanjana, I have a question here. You might be thinking I am having so many questions.
No. Please.
What does it mean when you say if you are from copy editing background, you can upload the book directly on KDP? And what is KDP?
Okay, KDP is what is called, it's a platform by the company Amazon. It is called Kindle Direct Publishing. I think you've all heard of Kindle. So Kindle is basically a version of, it doesn't go into print, or it's not like a standard PDF format that you upload. Kindle is kind of like a different format that you have to, layout wise, you need to probably hire someone to do the layout for you, or learn how to do it yourself by watching a few YouTubes. But if you're a copy editor, you definitely have an edge when it comes to direct publishing on Kindle, or even print on demand publishing services that are there. The reason I say that is because when you're a copy editor, you can check for your own flow. You probably have to do it 2 or 3 times, because I know that, in editing, sometimes we are biased towards our own voice and selection of words and how we structure our sentences. And sometimes there are discrepancies between one editor and another. So if you want, you can probably have a friend overlook those things for you. But if you're an editor, you obviously have an edge where you don't need to hire someone to check for flow, check for grammar, proofread your work. You don't need to hire someone who is going to probably, even sometimes in the name of editing, people change the content to their own interpretation and their own needs. You have more control over that. So that's what I meant when I said that if you're a copy editor, you definitely have an edge in that, and you can directly just learn the layout formatting aspect of it and directly upload it. So that's exactly what I meant by that. Hope that answers the question. Okay, perfect. Okay, so anyone else do you have any other questions?
Sanjana, hi.
Hi.
Hi. First of all, thanks a lot for collating all these specialized information in your presentation.
No.
So I just wanted to know that you just said that once you're ready with your manuscript, why don't you go to a publisher, even if you get a rejection, right? So
Yes.
what are the criteria? I mean, what are the traits you would like to find in a publisher to approach the publisher? First
Okay.
thing. And the second thing is say if you got first or like 1 or 2 rejections, then by that time you become more apprehensive, more so you want to maybe you want to approach a few other publishers. So is it does the process goes like one by one, reaching the publisher one by one, or you can you can approach many publishers at a time? So yeah, 2 questions.
Okay, so perfect question. Yes, so this does come in the realm of traditional publishing, so I'll just touch upon that a little briefly. One thing to address your second question, a lot of traditional publishers have the policy that is delineated right on their website that you cannot approach another publisher while they are having it under review. The reason being is because when a traditional publisher takes your manuscript to review it, it goes under an intensive process of review. So oftentimes, so I'll just explain the process that happens with majority of the publishers out there. So the first process would be, you would probably have to send a synopsis of your work. You would have to send them who your target audience is, the genre of your book, and you would also have to send them a 3-chapter sample. But they would require you to have the entire manuscript completed before you send a 3-chapter sample. You cannot send 3 chapters while you're working on your manuscript. The reason being is because sometimes even at the end of your book, the entire story may change, requiring you to make changes in the first 2 chapters, which is why they have that policy in place. So you would the standard, this is what you would have to submit. You would have to submit a synopsis, 3 chapters, and of course some market demographics as to, number one, who you are as the author, who your target audience is, and what genre book you're writing. So what happens is they take this information, they analyze first. If you are a person who has a huge social media following, you have an edge right there. But if you're an average person, they will have to look into other factors like, okay, is your book something that will really, really sell in the market? Is your book something that, has a need? Do the people in your target audience have the capacity to buy your book? Because for instance, when you look at children's books, even though you're targeting children, you're actually targeting the parents because they have the buying capacity.
Because they have
yes. So that being said, they have a lot of factors to analyze. Once they analyze all of these factors, it usually takes, because they have a board of members, they have a board of editors that sit around and do this discussion intensively. That being, again, when they sit and they do this, spending hours doing it, they would not like it if you send your manuscript to another person, because they believe it's a waste of their time, especially given the mass volume of submissions that they receive. And speaking of mass volume of submissions, it is very possible that you won't hear from the traditional publisher that you've submitted for at least 3 months to 6 months. And it has happened where they even reply in 1 year. I think Penguin publishers, they took, I think, 1.5 years to even respond. So there's a lot of things that go into it because, it depends on each publisher and what their criteria is. So the first thing is, before publishing, go to their submission guidelines page. Every publishing website has a submission guidelines page. And if they don't have a submission guidelines page, they will have at least a manuscript submission contact email ID or something. Reach out to them, get the information, and give it and start giving it with them. Regarding your first question, I think, could you repeat your first question for me?
I just wanted to ask that what are the traits you look in for a publisher? Like how to choose a publisher, being an author, how to choose a publisher. Like I would like, yeah, genre is one thing. You can see that right, this publisher is publishing books in this genre, fine. But there are certain publishers who are famous enough and they publish in every genre kind of. So yeah.
Yes. All right. So when it comes to choosing your publisher, the first factor you would need to look at is, of course, the submission guidelines. The reason I would say that is because sometimes people have different time frames. If you're not in a hurry to publish your book, then go for the big names in the industry that probably takes 6 months, 3 months to respond to your query. For some people who are more urgent with getting the responses and all of that, then in that case, like try to find someone who will respond within 1 month or who will actively respond in 1 or 2 months. It's very rare that a person will respond less than 1 month. Few people claim to respond in 2 to 3 weeks, but it doesn't really happen. It ends up taking 4 weeks for the process to happen. So the first thing is identify your goals as to what you want as an author. So if you want to publish in a specific time frame, or if you want to publish a specific genre because you have belief that I have a lot of people who I know who are going to buy this particular book, especially in academic publishing. If you have students who really want this book. In that case, what happens is a lot of people don't approach traditional publishers because, again, it's a 2-year process for you to even see the end product. So they go for self-publishing in that case. So that's how you choose between first traditional publishing and self-publishing. Then once you've determined that, if you are going to go for traditional publishing, what you need to do is, of course, like you said, find out which publisher specializes in which genre. You have some publishers who are really good in the genre of self-help, some publishers who are really good with children's books, things like that. So find out which publisher works where, and where they have the best track record, because at the end of the day, it's all about marketing. Sometimes you can be the best writer in the world, you can have the best literature that's out there. So yes, but when it comes to marketing, you need to find marketability versus quality is always a debatable thing. So you need to figure out which publisher has the best track record or best probability of marketing work that is very similar to yours. The other challenge in that is that when you approach someone with a lot of work that is too similar to yours, they may not take you up because they already have someone like that in the market. So it is, again, a very fine balance and why it's very, very tricky. It's like literally like playing a game of chess in the publishing industry. Like, how do you pitch this to a publisher? Because sometimes they may not know how to market your book. But when you're submitting your query letter, which will contain all the information of your demographics and who you are as a person, if you have the capacity to sell your book to them just through your words, sometimes even that works. So again, because at the other end, it's not an automated process. It's humans reviewing another human. So if you can psychologically create that impact on them, you sometimes can win.
Yeah, and it's step by step too. Like you move ahead one step and they move step ahead one step.
I think this is where an agent comes into play. I'm not sure whether a traditional publisher even entertains unsolicited submission of manuscripts.
Yes.
And the question that Ruchika is asking, how to find out, an individual author may not really have the answers for a variety of questions. Mm-hmm. So a better approach may be to, take the help of an agent.
Okay.
The agent might be able to actually put you in touch with the right publisher, right? Am I right?
So there are two different varieties. There is there are companies like Hachette that don't accept unsolicited manuscripts. But at the same time, there are companies, I think Penguin was accepting hard copy manuscripts up until recently, after which they said that they closed for submissions because of sheer volume. So it depends. Each publisher does open up unsolicited manuscripts for a specific time frame. There's a specific window. You'll always have to go and check on their website. Sometimes they have it open only for 1 month, so that they don't like to have a huge inflow of manuscripts that they cannot attend to. So in that 1 month, they'll probably receive 200 to 250 pitches. So from 250 pitches, they take it up. So with an agent, it's a little bit easier because you do have the ones who accept unsolicited manuscripts. You do have those publishers also with tie-ups with agents. And yes, majority of the top-notch publishers have links with a lot of these agencies and companies, like you said, sir. In those cases, there is a bit of politics in play. That also kind of, it's not black and white as I'd like to, I would like to say that it's black and white, but it's not. So what happens is, again, with an agency, they also get a cut. Again, it's a business. They get a cut from the publisher. They really have to believe in your work. So approaching an agent and having an agent accept your work in itself is as tedious as approaching a traditional publisher sometimes, is what I would say. But you do have a better chance. So in traditional publishing, if you have a 1% chance of being accepted, approaching an agent, you have a 5% chance of getting accepted. It's still a small chance rate, but it's a little better, like you said. So finding an agent is not the easiest thing in the world unless otherwise you have personal contacts. So that is something that I would also like to say as a disclaimer here.
Okay, thank you,
That's a
Sanjana.
good
Thank you.
eye-opener, I would say.
And hi, this is Cora.
Yes.
These days, a lot of literary agents also mix up editing with being literary agents. So they kind of, every time you send a book to them, they will say, no, your book isn't good enough, so it needs to be edited. So you have a lot of that happening as well.
That's true. That's true. So a lot of times there's not a lot of role clarity when it comes to people, accepting your book. An agent's job is to analyze your book and make sure that, it's somewhere, they can pitch it to one of their tie-ups. If they believe that your work can be pitched to, let's say, some publisher who's looking for work that is similar to yours, in that case, then yes, you have a better chance of having your book there. But an agent they can give you input as to like whether they believe your book is good enough or not, but they should not be giving input as to whether you need to hire an editor or have someone look into, the editing process and all of that, because usually the publishers take care of that. If they believe your content and your story is good enough, they take that on and they do that editing process as well. Perhaps this particular agent...
I know of at least quite a few literary agents who do that. They take your book and they want to do the editing as well as pose as your literary agent.
Uh-huh.
I know quite a few of them.
Do they charge for both? Okay.
If you because I had a couple of authors who needed literary agents whom I recommended, and I had these literary agents then saying, no, it needs to be edited as well as
yeah, I
offered to for traditional publishing.
I would actually warn against that. The reason being because a true literary agent will be too busy to engage in any other activities. So perhaps they're, either in a crunch or they don't get a lot of business. So maybe that's why they're pitching other activities and services. So that's why I would warn against.
And these are well-known literary agents.
Yes, that happens. So maybe their business is down and they're trying to, get you to pay them for it and things like that. So yes, so that is true. These things do happen. Yeah. Any other questions, or can we move on to the next slide? Okay, I think we'll move on. So the next slide I wanted to talk about is jobs in self-publishing. So when we're talking about the different jobs that are there in self-publishing, yes, they are very, very similar to that of any publishing house. So irrespective of whether you're working in academic publishing or traditional publishing houses or anything, you're aware of the different personnel that are involved in a publishing house. The most important, or the cream of the cream, being the editors, of course. You have the acquisition editors that are there, and then you have the copy editors, you have proofreaders, you have quality checkers, you have so many people in different publishing houses. But at the same time, if you were to ask me if every publishing house employs all of the workers that are eligible to work in publishing, the answer would be no. Some people, they club their IT department with their graphics department, and some people, they club editors with proofreaders, things like that. Mostly for the sake of cost cutting. And this would only happen in self-publishing areas, because traditional publishing, you cannot really do that to great success. So they won't take that much of a risk because their name is attached to it. They're the ones investing in it. So they won't take a risk to skip certain processes that are required in the publishing workflow. But at the same time, in self-publishing, one of the pros is if you're going to work with a self-publisher, your pay may be a little better. The reason being, less amount of work, less amount of requirement in quality, and more amount of pay. which I wouldn't say is probably the best possible thing for the industry. But as a person who is approaching the industry and is looking for a rather cushy job where I can just like, take, some because they take bulk amount of work and you need to finish editing within a specific given time limit. So there's only so much editing that you can do to a manuscript, especially when it comes to 650,000 word manuscripts, 160,000 word manuscripts. There's only so much work you can do within a given amount of time. That being said, they do have a better pay, but is this a blanket policy among all self-publishers? No. So if you're going to approach a self-publisher or a job or something like that, make sure you do find out, what volume of work they have, because the more volume of work they have, the higher they will pay you. So always do your market research on that if you are looking for a job in the self-publishing industry. So the more people that approach them, the more work you will have and the more they will be able to and willing to pay you. That is one of the biggest boons in the self-publishing industry, especially for editors in the industry. Of course, that is the highest in demand. They're always looking for good quality editors. And I won't say that the quality is always going to be consistent because, sometimes people just take what they get. So if they have a set number of applications, like let's say a company has maybe 100 applications, they just take the best from what they get. So it's always going to be a game of chance as to whether they have the best editors in the business or not. So just if you believe you can offer something really good to a self-publishing company and you have the capacity to handle high volumes of work, I would definitely suggest approaching a very reputed self-publisher in the nation. Then the thing is, a lot of the processes when it comes to publishing are costly and cost intensive because they require human power. Slowly what's happening is, and I think all of you are aware, is that they are trying to there's a lot of automation and they're trying to automatize a lot of processes that happen. I think even with a few things like, running spell check, that's an automated process. Back in the day, that wasn't even an option. They had to hire someone for that. But running spell check is something that is cost effective. So similar to that, there are a lot of processes that are being, that are taken into automation. For instance, we have a lot of layouts, a lot of graphics, a lot of, the cover designs in itself doesn't require as much of an intensive process as it once did, because you have a lot of platforms for free on the internet where you can generate your own cover design and you can make it yourself. So I would say a lot of times graphics and designing is at a bit of a risk for automation because their demand is, I wouldn't say less, it's actually a high demand job, but I would say it's at risk because the work that is required for them is very, very challenging. If they're going to hire someone in graphics or illustrations, they need to make sure that they're able to find someone who can provide services that are worth the money that they're paying and not services that are already available on the internet that you can find for free. So that's a huge, huge challenge in publishing. They constantly, with automation, you're pushing the bar, you're pushing, the expectations higher and higher. So people are forced to think even more out of the box so that they can prove that they're employable. So yes, that is one of the issues that are happening, that is happening with the publishing industry currently. And yes, another thing is layout. I think people are still figuring out layout a little bit, but I think one day it will be completely eliminated as something that someone needs to physically sit and do. The reason being is, the reason why even there's a person who overlooks the layout and all of that is because at the end of the day, every word and every format that you're having is going to be unique for each book. We don't yet have a system or a computer or machine that is smart enough to analyze those differences and club it into different pages in an effective way. So that's why we always have a human that is overseeing that process, or a human actually doing that process, depending on what services you're paying for or who has access to what software. So that is something that I think I foresee one day probably being eliminated as well. Of course, pay grade. Like I said, editing is something that they will pay you very well for. especially if you go in for, or if you're working in acquisitions or marketing, you're going to be paid really, really well. So yes, in self-publishing, the main thing is, yes, editing, but at the same time, marketing. So if anything that has to do with business, networking with people, maybe even having contacts with literary fairs that happen here and there, those things really do escalate your value in the self-publishing industry, which allow you to be paid a lot more than perhaps your colleagues. So you have to establish what your value in the market is going to be. Do you have the contacts necessary to be effective in the market? Do you have the skills necessary to analyze the market and market your book? Do you understand social media? Do you understand the current trends that are happening? So these are all different factors that you definitely need to assess and within yourself as to what you can offer the company that they probably don't already have. And that's one of the biggest challenges in business and marketing, is understanding these factors, analyzing these factors, and pitching yourself, just and making sure that people value you the way you value yourself. So that's something that I would definitely ask each and every one who is looking for a job, maybe in self-publishing, to do. So before I move on to the next slide, is there any questions regarding this? No questions, I guess. Okay. So I'll move on to the next slide, which is, I'm going to be talking about the editor differences here. So with the editor differences, I want to highlight between traditional and self-publishing. So in traditional publishing, the editors are going to be spending vast amount of time. They will be given at least, so what happens is, it's more of a back and forth process. The editor is required to work with the author. They will sit with the author. They maybe not literally, maybe virtually, whatever is available, but they will in some way sit with the author and walk through the author's goals, how they want the reader to interpret different aspects of what's written, because often what comes to the editor is a very, very raw format of a really, really good idea. In traditional publishing, that's often what happens. So the editor, in a way, has to have a little bit of authorial knowledge. They need to know what it is like to be an author in some way, or at least have the empathy as to what an author would like, or what they would want for their readers to interpret. A lot of conflicts that happen in traditional publishing between the editor and the author is often conflicts where the author feels like they are right and the editor is wrong. There's going to be a lot of issues between these parties sometimes in traditional publishing, which is where the acquisitions editor, or they have someone who is allocated specifically for your book, who will mediate between the editor and you, and so that there's no conflict of interest as such. But there is a huge chance that there will be, even some of the greatest authors out there have issues with their publishers, have issues with their agencies, mostly because they believe they believe in different strategies. Their editor may suggest an edit which they do not agree with. Maybe they would ask to remove a few pages or even a chapter from the book, because the editor believes that the flow is better without that chapter. But the author, who has spent probably a month writing that chapter, will not have the heart to remove that chapter. So again, it comes down to communication between the editor and rather than the editor, the traditional publishing house, and the author, as to how they're going to convince the author as to what's necessary, what's a necessary edit, and what is an unnecessary edit. So these are things that I think is crucial to understand if you're going to work in a traditional publishing house. I don't know how many of you are editors in traditional publishing houses, and if you faced any of these issues. If you have, I would love for you to share those experiences at the end of this session. But yes, these are issues that do crop up, and there is a bit of, especially when it comes to art, there's a bit of an ego clash between the vision that the author has and the vision that the person who's going to market that art has. So that is something I think you need to be prepared for if you're going to be an editor in a traditional publishing house. In a self-publishing house, the editor is more acquiescing. They kind of go along with the author, because their primary goal, in traditional publishing, the primary goal is marketing the book that they're investing in. In self-publishing, the primary goal is making sure that the person who has paid them is satisfied. So the approach is going to be very, very different. So in self-publishing, when it comes to the editors are more laid back, they're more acquiescing. It's, again, less intensive because, you know, the time frame is number one less, and the other thing is they're more focused on whether the author is convinced that their edits are enough and whether the author is satisfied with their services. So there is the base. Of course, there are going to be exceptions. There are going to be some people who are lucky enough to get a really, really amazing editor who really, you know, puts their heart and soul into the work. But the basic, I think it's really important to understand the basic business differences, because the probability of these things happening are going to be more when you approach these two different houses. Yes, there are exceptions, but the probability is there mostly because of the goals being different in both traditional and self-publishing houses. So that's why, so when we look at why these differences exist, again, it's because of those business goals. And, you know, the profit margin here in self-publishing is going to be a little different, whereas in traditional publishing, they are yet to even see a profit. So they're investing in something they already don't know whether it's going to make a huge profit or not. So in traditional publishing, they're probably going to be a little more in control of your work, and you probably will have a little less of a voice than you would assume you would have. And whereas in self-publishing, you are basically the king because you are paying the person for the services. They will advise you, they will give you some sort of counseling and all, guidance and all of that. But that being said, I don't think you know, your goals as an author in the market would be as effectively met with a self-publisher just by self-publishing. So that's where these differences exist. And that's where I wanted to give a disclaimer saying that, of course, this is not like a blanket rule across all self-publishing and all traditional publishing. There are traditional publishers, small-time traditional publishers, who have the luxury to sit down and probably listen to the author a little more. And maybe they're not investing as much because the number of prints they're putting out is less. So they're more sure of their small-time sales. Maybe they distribute to schools, maybe they distribute to small vendors who do somehow make sales, you know, maybe in transport areas and things like that. So again, it does differ from different publisher to publisher. There are numerous factors in between, but the base of both of these, this is what it is. So that's where I wanted to give the disclaimer. So if there are any questions in this slide, let me know. I'll answer those questions before we move on to the last slide. Any questions? Okay, so let me move on to the last and final slide, which is going to talk about the current market. The current market is a very diverse one. I know, so as you can see, I've put 3 topics. I'm going to interconnect these 3 when I'm talking about the current market. So the first thing is desktop publishing. As I said, I'm going to be using Amazon KDP as a major platform. And then we're going to be talking about another, not a competitor, but it's a platform that is similar to Amazon KDP, a lot more user-friendly, but they went out of business. So we're going to do a little market study as to like why this competitor didn't work out and Amazon KDP is working out so well in desktop publishing. So that's one thing we're going to be talking about. The next thing is we're going to be talking about the different marketing options. So let's say you are going to go in for self-publishing. Let's say you decided that you have, you're willing to take a risk, you're willing to invest your money, and that you have the resources to do marketing for yourself. So you want to know what marketing options are out there that you can engage in. So we're going to be discussing that as well. And through marketing options, we're going to be talking about social media and self-publishing and how social media has influenced the market of self-publishing. And yes, I can't mention names again, but we will be giving pseudonames for some of these people, and I'll be giving their case study. So you can have a better understanding with practical examples. So the first thing is desktop publishing. That has transformed the entire fabric of the publishing market. In a way, I would say it's a huge blessing because a lot of people who especially artistically inclined people, once back in the day, were forced to choose between, you know, traditional publishing or being accepted traditionally, or paying large amounts of money to a self-publisher. So desktop publishing has given the option for these individuals who have spent a lot of time on their work and who probably can't afford a self-publisher the luxury to upload their work. And desktop publishing has become more wide-reaching because Amazon is an international name. So it's a platform on which anyone can actually access your work. Anyone can access your book. It's easy for people to just send that Amazon link and be like, hey, buy my book, because I just gave you the link to it. So it's very accessible. It's very useful. It's something that has broken a lot of boundaries in the publishing market. So I think I would say the positives outweigh the negatives being that the market is currently very, very crowded. So when you have a crowded market, what happens is, first of all, the attention span of the average human being is very, very less. So you're not going to be as memorable in the market as you would assume probably back in the day. Right now, you would see a lot of people having different trends. And even on social media, I think the best way to explain this is through social media. You see on social media various trends popping up, various brands popping up, but at the same time, the lifespan of that trend or brand is significantly less compared to what it once was. So with desktop publishing, that's one of the issues that can happen. You probably will see amazing sales with good marketing techniques for the first month. But after that, you know, your next month, you're going to find more people who have published in your same genre, maybe something that's very similar to what you have said, and maybe it's an even better version. Like, let's say you're putting out a cookbook, but you have, you know, some really reputed chef who's putting out the same version of those recipes in their own twist and their own versions. Your sales immediately is going to go down because nobody's really going to take your word versus probably say a very reputed chef in the industry. So that's one of the risks with desktop publishing is definitely going to be your longevity in the market. So that being said, I did want to talk about one of the other platforms that was available, I think back in 2011. It's not exactly what Amazon KDP is doing. So what they did is basically they would encourage a lot of authors to post their books online. It's it's like a cross between Wattpad and Amazon KDP. I don't know how many of you are aware of Wattpad, the site that's available, WATTPAD. So this is a site where a lot of people put up a lot of their novels and their stories. It's basically kind of like a blogging / story reading site where anyone can put up their short stories, they can put up their novels, and it's like social media for authors, where people just share all of their content for free. And sometimes you even find a lot of Netflix series picked up from Wattpad stories as well. So yes, there is a huge reach with that as well. Again, this particular site encouraged people to sell their books for less amount of money, but you could upload, you know, for free. You didn't have much layout issues. You could just upload directly. You could just convert your work into, you know, just copy paste into their platform, and it would directly upload with an amazing layout. You can choose your title and all of that. Now, the reason why that particular platform didn't work is because, number one, again, marketing. With Amazon KDP, it's easier to understand a little bit about the marketing that it goes on in it. Even if you're going to engage in some sort of buyback policies, you do have a better chance of getting some sort of visibility in Amazon because you have a lot of traffic. And if you do understand the keywords that are there, so for instance, if you are talking about healthcare and at one point in time, maybe there is, like, for instance, right now, you know, a lot of the keywords related to boosting immunity or the coronavirus, things like that, those keywords are really in a trend. So Amazon KDP picks up on these keywords and it throws it out. So it comes in your recommendation. So even if you were Googling about, you know, the virus at any point in time, maybe in Amazon you were buying a mask, or maybe on Google you were, you know, Googling these issues, you have a higher probability of one of these books being thrown onto your screen as a recommendation. So that's where Amazon KDP kind of enter the market, and also showed that it has the chance for sustainability because it has more appeal, it has more mass appeal, and it does give the authors a little more pride when they say my book is available on Amazon. So there is a psychological component to that as well, which is why they were able to last in the market for so long. So yes, with desktop publishing, that's what I wanted to highlight upon in the current market. So with a crowded market, how are you going to market your book? So if we're going to talk about marketing options that are available in the current market, you definitely have so many marketing options that can be really useful to marketing your book. We have social media and self-publishing as one of the topics because social media in the current era is one of the biggest influencers of market. I don't know how many of you have heard of, I don't know if I can say these names, but there are huge Instagram accounts where they post these small stories, small snippets, small anecdotes that you see. And they started off as small Instagram accounts sharing certain quotes or maybe certain anecdotes or small forms of poetry, or even sometimes they just form have dialogues or some sort of simple written material that's there on. They had their own, they ended up publishing more difficult for traditional literature because again, the quality right is something that would sell over a long period of time. And for immediate sales of like a one-time sort of thing, they look for sustainability as well. So even if you do have a following of 1 million, but your content is not so good, you are probably going to get rejected by a traditional publisher because.
Excuse me, Sanjana. Sanjana, we could not listen to you for the last 1 minute.
I think
the voice was breaking.
There might be some issue with her connection. I will just check with her.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
All right. So again, so coming back to the marketing options. In social media, you find, I think, hashtags. I think the younger generation may be more aware of the use of hashtags and how to utilize them more effectively. So with hashtags, one thing that you find is that a lot of times if someone is clicking on content that has a relevant hashtag, your content with the same hashtag will be thrown up. Okay, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll continue from where I stopped. I think I was talking about social media hashtags and the use of hashtags in marketing for your self-published book. So when it comes to the use of hashtags, I'll just repeat that point again in case it wasn't audible for anyone. You need to make sure that you're using relevant hashtags to your content or to your book. So if you are, again, let's use the recipe of having a cookbook. So if you are having maybe a cookbook and you have recipes, don't use hashtags like Throwback Thursday or inspiration or life motivation, even though those hashtags have a lot of followers on them. Make sure you use relevant hashtags. Because what happens when you use irrelevant hashtags just because they're trending is that you end up attracting the wrong audience. And yes, while the engagement may seem a little higher for the time being, that will not translate into sales. So when you use hashtags like food or delicious or something, or some sort of a keyword that a lot of people are following in terms of hashtags, you are going to maybe slowly develop a niche audience that follow this hashtag and are more interested in this hashtag. But the benefit of this is that that audience is more likely to invest in your book. That audience is going to be more likely to purchase your book and listen to what you have to say. So make sure you don't use hashtags or keywords just because something is trending. Because again, the goal for any author in the market who's trying to make sales is longevity, not just, you know, one-time sales and then go on. Of course, different authors have different goals. Some people, they don't look at sales, they just want the name of having published a book. And that's fine too. But if you're an author who's looking for longevity and a long-term sales proposition, then I would definitely suggest sticking to your specific market and understanding who you're targeting. Don't be tempted by these one-time viral things that come across. So that's one thing with social media. And yes, a lot of times personal anecdotes sell really well on social media. The reason why I personally wouldn't endorse that is because, yes, it depends from person to person, but at the same time, it puts a lot of pressure on the author, and it does take a direct hit on their mental health. So when you're taking up marketing for your own artwork, one thing I think we need to talk about is marketing, the current market, capitalism, and how it is going to affect the artist's mental health. When you're going to take upon the marketing activities, you need to have the strength to distinguish the market from your self-worth in your art. You need to be able to withstand rather a lot of the potential scrutiny that's going to come from the outside world. You need to be able to understand that sometimes, even if your work is amazing, it's not the right time to put out that art in the market, and that's why it's not being accepted in the market. And in the current market, it's even more, I would say sometimes it's even toxic because of social media, where there's a lot of pressure, a lot of content is being thrown around. And for users, it's a blessing because you don't have to be bored for long periods of time. If you like a specific topic, you have options where you can engage with different types of content. But for a creator, they definitely would like to have that sort of loyalty for their art. So a lot of times creators end up being a little more under pressure, and when they take up their own marketing activities, they don't have they burn out very easily. So that's where I would say, if you don't have the proper network, or if you don't have your goals specifically designed, in that case, I would say it's worth hiring someone in the self-publishing industry, or just going for a self-publisher who has at least a decent sense of marketing capabilities. Of course, it won't be the best because they have really nothing to lose other than probably their reputation. Sometimes self-publishers, if they really care about their reputation, they will invest a lot more in marketing and help you out, at least to make a few of the good books bestsellers. So if you're one of those lucky few that they determine, okay, if we make this person a bestseller, it's going to be great for our brand image, then maybe you can definitely make it big in self-publishing. So I wanted to talk about some case studies where a lot of these self-publishers have made it big in the market. So I'm going to use some sample names, like let's say author A, for instance. So this particular author is someone who had a fiction genre where they had taken it into self-publishing. It was, it was kind of a mythological, mystical sort of a mix that they had written. And it went into a self-publishing house. They ended up self-publishing it. And what happens in self-publishing is that if you are lucky and if you do well in the market, traditional publishing houses will come and pick you up. And it's very convenient for these traditional publishing houses to do that because they already know how you're performing in the market. So once they know how you're performing in the market, they will come in and they will give you an offer to sign a contract where you no longer have to spend for reprints and things like that, and for subsequent releases. They will come in and they'll sign you on so that, it'll be like a one-time book investment. So once you are picked up by a traditional publisher, your investment with that is done. Your traditional publisher will guide you with the rest of the work that's happening. So it is very possible for someone who's doing, for instance, in this author's case, they ended up selling really, really well. They ended up selling on a lot of platforms, getting amazing reviews. Maybe their reach wasn't as much as it could be, but the traditional publishers saw that potential, and they discovered this author through a literary agency. So this particular author was trying all sorts of ways in which they can make sure that they are discovered by a traditional publisher, or at least picked up in the market in a way. So their next books that they released were released by the traditional publishing house, where they didn't have to spend anything. So it is very possible that that can happen. But again, I think it is more of a luxury, because not everyone has the capacity to spend that much money and then do the marketing and succeed at that, and then have the time to seek out a traditional publisher and a literary agency. Very rarely do they approach you on your own. Sometimes the literary agents discover these self-publishers on their own, and they will approach these self-published authors and say, hey, we have a tie-up with this traditional publishing house who would actually love to represent you for your future work. So very rarely does that happen, but it is possible. So if this is something that you feel, if you're a self-published author, you can never have a name in the traditional market, that's actually very false. There's no such thing as, you have invested your money once in a book, you have to do it for the rest of your life. Nothing like that. Again, it depends on a lot of factors. So this is something that is very possible, and it's something that I would recommend for someone who has the means. And if you feel like you can create a good enough market or buzz around your book for 1 to 1.5 months, and you can do that, and maybe at the time where you feel the sales may be slacking off a little bit, you can create a little bit more of a buzz, and then approach maybe a literary agent or a traditional publishing house saying, like, this is the book that I have out there, I would like someone to help me market it, it's doing this much in sales. So that is an option that people do take up. But having said that, you don't have to do it only through self-publishing. You can also do it by publishing your work on Amazon KDP. And even if you're not comfortable with the layout and all of that on Amazon KDP, you can definitely go and put your work up on Wattpad, which has been picked up for a lot of movies and series on Netflix, as I mentioned. So it doesn't mean that you have to be traditionally published to be a success in the industry. There are ways to be success. I think success has different layouts and formats. It depends on each person and how you utilize your opportunities to the best of your ability. And a lot of times, you can't always say that opportunity will meet your preparedness at the right time at all the time. Sometimes, a lot of authors are amazingly prepared, but the market is just not the right time. So that is one of the risk factors in the market. And then there is a huge debate in the industry between marketability and quality. Quality being, I think, as copy editors, you would all know that, you value well-written content. You value content that actually, has a flow. It's well-written, no grammatical errors. It actually flows, and it's very easy to read. Unfortunately, not all content that is well-structured and easy to read are bestsellers in India. And not all literature-worthy content become bestsellers in India. Not just in India, anywhere across the world. And I think, again, I don't want to give examples, but if you can just think about what, authors the current generation actually know, and the sort of, books that they read or pick up in, the library, you would know that a lot of times you would wonder how quality, is it really essential for a book? And sometimes it does make the artistic mind quite sad when they do see, work that probably could be described as lazy doing really well in the market. So again, it's very subjective. At the end of the day, you need to realize that while you are the author, the buyer or the reader has a different perception as to what will add value to them. So irrespective of whether you're going to go in through self-publishing means or traditional publishing means, the market is a fierce one. It is a very torrid one. It's something that you cannot really predict at all times, and can take a toll on you at different stages for different reasons. So the advantage of having a self-publisher in marketing is that it kind of takes the ease away from you. It takes the pressure off of you. It eases your mind, which is where I would say if you cannot personally handle marketing and those activities, definitely find a good self-publisher who can do that for you. So any questions related to this? This is our final slide. So if anyone wants to share any of their experiences as well, you can do so, I think. And we can use this time for interactions and any questions as well.
Sanjana, you were mentioning something about Instagram when you actually got cut off.
Okay, okay.
Can you repeat that part?
Right. So in Instagram, I was talking about some of the, I think a lot of the younger generation, again, would know these accounts. They're accounts that give a lot of anecdotes. They give a lot of snippets in poetry or quotes, or sometimes even just mere dialogues that are so-called, quote unquote, meaningful. So they get a lot of engagement on Instagram because they're easy to share. These are easy snippets that people actually relate to, where the shareability is a lot more and people kind of make their statements. A lot of people speak through these posts, and essentially I think that's what art is. You're attracted to what is going to speak to you a lot more. So on Instagram, I think that's one advantage where a lot of these artists have found this way of consolidating some material into like small quotes or small bite-sized pieces that people can actually digest and share easily on social media. So these people end up amassing a huge amount of followers. And when they amass these followers, they end up approaching some traditional publishers and self-publishers. And I think I was mentioning that just because you have a huge following on social media, a traditional publisher is not always guaranteed to pick you up. The reason being because in traditional publishing, they look at sustainability of your book, whether it can go for a reprint, it has the potential for reprint and business over time. That's something that they look for as well, because at the end of the day, they want to make sure they can maximize on your art form so that they can make the appropriate sales as well. So that being said, that is the case for traditional publishing, but a lot of these Instagrammers who have huge, or Instagram writers, they do go in for self-publishing. And what they do is it's easy for them to market. So if you have the time and if you have, some sort of innovative idea where you can amass some sort of a following on your Instagram or Facebook or any social media platform, if you have the time and energy to do that and then put out a book. And of course, when you ask your followers to buy those books, you probably are more likely to make a sales with the random market. Because the people who follow you are not your friends and family. They are people who probably follow you because they really appreciate your art form, and they will read your work. And once they really like your work, they will recommend it, and then it'll start getting, traction. It'll gain traction through word of mouth. So that is something that you can do as a technique if you are someone who has the time to spend on Instagram, social media, or any form of social media for that matter, and have a brand or gain a name. So that's what I was mentioning about Instagram.
Okay, thanks, Sanjana. And I would request you if you can introduce yourself again, so that those who joined late, they can also know about your initiative.
Sure. So my name is Sanjana, for those of you who don't know. So I am the founder and proprietor for a small company called Think Right India. We started off as a training and development company where we train a lot of these aspiring authors, writers. We give them insights about the market. We train them about publishing trends. We train them about publishing services. And we do also, give a lot of training with regards to monetizing various aspects of writing and art forms. So this is something that we initially started off doing. We were an educational form of the company initially, and recently we have entered the market into, I think for the last 6 months, we've been doing business writing, where we write content for various other forums. We have a lot of editors, and they edit our content for us, and we do have writers for that matter as well. So that's basically a gist about Think Right India. We do, of course, it's not all just business. We're all kind of passionate about what we do. So we do share a lot of tips and tricks, and we have a lot of free seminars, free sessions that we have with our brand as well. So that's basically about me. And I started off my career in STM publishing. And after I focused more on the business side of publishing and understanding how different businesses are run, and where the gap between the author and the business is, and we try to fill that gap. So that's basically about me.
Okay, thanks, Sanjana. Cora has a question. Don't you have to pay to upload your book on KDP? And what about the format that is needed for uploading the book?
Okay, this is a more nuanced question. You do not need to pay to, you can definitely, I would suggest watching a YouTube video, because it is a very intense sort of a process. It's not something like where I can say, okay, you go into Word, you do this, it's fine. So I would suggest maybe I'll share a link to a YouTube video which explains all of these things in the group, so that we can, discuss that as well. But yes, regarding KDP, it is free. You do not have to pay for any sort of upload or anything. You as the author can decide if you want to pay someone to edit your book or do some of the publishing services that you probably can't do by yourself. Even if you are unfamiliar with the layout aspect of it, you can pay someone, probably they'll ask around like 5,000 to 3,000 to 5,000 bucks is the standard that they ask for, uploading your book after doing the appropriate layout with the images and your content and all of that. So that's, if you are not comfortable doing the uploading yourself, you can definitely ask someone to do that. That being said, I know a lot of people who are not aware of layout and how to, upload on Amazon, what they do is they directly upload their Word document onto Amazon. And it is kind of, I'll maybe share some samples in the group as well, but there are some areas where you can see that the layout is jumbled. And it kind of becomes really hard for the person who's purchasing your book to read. So that's there, but it is possible to upload without knowing the layout also. And yeah, that's one of the negatives also with Amazon, because anyone can upload anything. So that's one of the things that happens there.
Lakshmi has a question. Would you be able to tell us how costly is traditional publishing? So I'm not sure whether she meant to ask about traditional publishing or about self-publishing. Lakshmi, can you please clarify this? You can unmute yourself. Okay, she's asking about traditional.
Okay. So traditional publishing is free. Ideally speaking, that's why they're called traditional publishers, because these are publishers who will invest in your book. So if they feel that your book is really good or worthy of being invested in, they will take your book and they will do everything from A to Z, and they will literally give you the final copy. So you don't have to pay for any of the services that come in between. What does happen is, if you go through a literary agent, your royalties will be less. So they'll probably take a 20 to 25% commission, sometimes even a 50% commission, depending on what the literary agent is negotiating with you. They will also be there when negotiating your contract with the traditional publisher. So you won't be losing any money. You'll probably only be losing in terms of royalties. And in traditional publishing, you don't make many royalties, because money, or you don't see a lot of royalties. The reason being, when you're having someone invest in your book, they need to first make back all of the money that they have invested in your book. So only after they have in business, we call it break even. So only after they have reached that break even point, will they even have profits. And from those profits, they will be giving you that money. So if you're approaching traditional publishing, you lose nothing, except you probably won't see as much royalties as you would expect to see, unless otherwise you're a bestseller, or someone who's very, very reputed and has made a ton of sales. So that would answer your question.
Sanjana, just
Yes.
a minute. So in traditional, they don't specify a royalty. Like in self-publishing, very often the author and the self-publisher decide on the royalty.
Yes.
In the traditional form, they do not specify a royalty. Is that what you say?
No, in traditional publishing, they will tell you, they'll give you a percentage. So the contract will always specify the percentage. Each contract differs from publisher to publisher. And depending on the number of pages in your book, the amount of work they have to put in, the amount of time they spend on your book, all of that will vary the costing that the traditional publisher has to invest into your book. So that being said, they won't be able to tell you beforehand, but after they have finalized how many pages, what resources they will be using, they will be able to make an estimate for the cost, and based off of that, they'll give you a rough percentage. They'll probably say, okay, we'll give you 10% or 15% cut of the royalties that come for the first printing, things like that. So that's about all that they will disclose to you in the beginning stages.
So what you're saying is traditional vis-a-vis self-publishing. Self-publishing would then pay more in royalties compared to the traditional publishing?
Yes, ma'am. And so in self-publishing, you do have more access to the royalties because you've already covered the cost for the publisher. So because you've already covered the cost, they have no reason to take a cut from you. The only time they will take a cut is probably they'll say, because they're doing continuous marketing activities, so they'll probably charge a monthly fee from your royalties that they will be withholding before they give you, make the payment to you. So that is the only difference that is there. Of course, you have more access to your royalties in self-publishing than you do in traditional publishing. In fact, the difference is quite vast.
Yeah, but how do you really know how much you are selling? Because will you really get the right figure at the end of the day when you are doing self-publishing? How do you control your actual sale figure?
That is actually one of the most difficult aspects that are there. And I think even there's huge lawsuits that go on in the industry as well because of that. But at the end of the day, recently, especially with Amazon, you do get a counter as to how many books are being sold on the site. So when it comes to virtual sales or sales online or being purchased through some sort of site, it is easy for people to tell, especially when sales are made online. But when it comes to physical copy sales in any publishing, maybe these like Higginbotham's or some library or something like that, where people physically go to buy the copy, you rely on the sales count that is given by the third-party vendor. So you just have to take it at face value sometimes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Deepak Bhushan has a question about like what subjects are like evergreen, they sell always.
Uh-huh. So when it comes to evergreen subjects, self-help is always a genre that is going to be in the market that everyone would sustain. Anything to do with philosophy, anything to do with finding oneself, anything to do with understanding this journey of life, most probably is like the most evergreen genre is what I would say. The reason being because it's always going to be it's going to be relevant in one's life. There's never going to be a time where it's irrelevant. And this is something that applies across ages when it comes to books like any philosophical books or anything that has to do with self-help. Mark Ronson is one of the authors who's capitalized on that. So anything to do with that market that doesn't really have much limitations in terms of the demographics. It doesn't have much limitations because we're all one species. So we're all trying to make sense of this life. And that kind of has an impact as to the so-called evergreen quotient. But at the same time, does it mean that if you're going to put out this sort of a self-help book or philosophy-based life understanding book, that it will be a great hit? No, actually, that depends again on a lot of factors. Though you have a greater probability with the genre, it depends on who's writing the book. If I'm writing the book, I don't have much. I'm pretty I'm not as old as I should be when it comes to talking about life. I don't have the sort of wisdom that a 60 or 70-year-old may have. So me writing that book would actually maybe Shetty, Mark Ronson, who are also young people who write these who approach these genres and write these books. So yeah, in that case, they had a really good social media following. They had a really good branding. They had people who actually valued what they had to say. So they were able to sustain in the market, even these evergreen genres. So there's no such thing as like, this particular genre is guaranteed sales. Again, it depends on a lot of factors, but you have a greater probability when it comes to self-help and philosophy. And not like subject-wise philosophy, but like, the fiction type anecdotal philosophy. So that's what I would say is the evergreen market.
Uh, Cora is asking you to share your contact details, so maybe you can do that in the chat box.
Sure, I'll do that.
And
I'll just stop sharing. And
if there are any more questions, then please ask either in the chat box or you can unmute yourself. But overall, it was a great session and we got to know about a lot of things. One thing which I want to ask Sanjana is about, like, I have noticed a different model in self-publishing where the author actually runs a crowdsourcing or crowdfunding kind of campaign, and the author ensures that a certain number of people pre-order the book. So that the self-publisher's cost is covered, and then like they guarantee a certain royalty or whatever. So do you have some more inputs on that?
yes, so this is like, I think it's a crowdfunding source. We can find this not just in the genre of publishing, but even with films and film production as well. So there are, so crowdfunding is not exactly a very new concept in the industry. It's kind of been there for a while, but recently it has gained traction in publishing and written form of art. The reason being, with social media, it's easy for people to pitch different, let's say someone has a following of like 50,000 members and they ask for someone to invest in their vision for a book. It's easier for them to find someone who is willing to invest in that vision because it allows them to feel like they're a part of that artistic journey and they're understanding that as well. So social media has kind of changed the game a little bit when it comes to crowdfunding sources, especially from third-party personnel rather than people who are within your own circle. The thing with that is there are advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantages being that 60% of the time, the people who are investing in your book probably, if they're lucky, will get their costs covered. They'll get their money back. It's again, sales is not guaranteed. The only probably advantage that they have is that the person investing in the book will have their name mentioned somewhere in the book. So I think the appeal of being immortalized in your art is one of those things that blinds people into investing into these schemes. So unless otherwise you really know the person personally, don't go in for like these crowdfunding campaigns for even books or anything that's there. I know a lot of people, they do that for anthologies. What they do is they ask them to contribute a short story, and then they ask them to, yes, of course, after contributing the short story, their name is there in the book, but they also ask them for a fee so that they can self-publish that anthology. So if, let's say, someone is going to self-publish for 50,000 and there are 5 members, each person has to put in 10,000, which is significantly less than one person investing that much. So again, the thing is, if anyone really thinks that they're going to get back their 50,000 that they've invested, it's never 100% shot. There's a 40% chance that that's going to happen. So be practical about it. Analyze the pros and cons. If you just want your name out there, then go ahead and do it, because it is a less cost. You're putting your name out there. You are getting published. So that is one of the benefits. So as an author, just always be practical about it and identify your goals and what you want from the entire publishing process. Is it just the vanity of having your name there on a book? Or do you really want your name there and you want your money back? So yeah, that's one thing you would probably have to analyze.
Thanks, Sanjana.
Sure.
So we have had another 2-hour-long webinar.
Okay.
And thanks a lot to Sanjana for doing this at very short notice. Next week also we will be like discussing the topic of self-publishing in more depth, maybe some specific areas, and licensing rights, royalties, copyright. These all are terms that we would like to know more about and how as editors we can help our author clients and what options authors have in terms of monetizing their product and selling it in different markets. So see you again next week, same time.
Yes.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much.